Order. The question is the bill be read a second time. The honourable member for Moreton.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on the Agricultural and Veterinary Chemicals Legislation Amendment Bill 2013. The electorate of Moreton does not have a lot of agriculture in it, Deputy Speaker, but I do have the Brisbane markets in my electorate, so a lot of the produce, especially from Queensland, does come through my electorate, and I have a particular interest coming from growing up in a rural area and having been a member of your committee in the 42nd Parliament, Deputy Speaker. I do have a particular interest in this area, and it's certainly a topic that people in my electorate have spoken to me about with concerns about the possible effects on the health of their children in terms of our approach to chemicals. So the proposed regulations include amendments to refine the scope of agricultural chemical products and veterinary chemical products regulated by the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority, or the APVMA, and to implement Council of Australian Government reforms. To amend the manufacturer's licence conditions to align with conditions that are currently and routinely applied to licences, to address other minor issues that have been identified with the regulations, including removing redundant or unnecessary provisions and addressing a few errors. The Gillard Labor government is committed to reform of the agriculture and veterinary chemical products so that the efficiency and effectiveness of current measures can be improved and, in turn, provide better protection for human health and the environment. It was the foresight of the Hawke and Keating governments, working in partnership with their state and territory counterparts, that put in place Australia's first national regulator for AgVet chemicals. It is now almost 20 years since this system began, and it has served the Australian community well over this period. But, as with all legislated systems, they can fall behind best practice. The amendments in the bill enhance the consistency and transparency of assessments of agricultural chemicals and veterinary medicines. Legislative amendments enable the APVMA to align regulatory effort with chemical risk to farmers. Very, very important. The reforms implemented by this bill will result in a more straightforward assessment process that is easier to understand and more cost-effective to administer, and provide greater certainty to the community that agricultural and veterinary chemicals used in Australia are safe, and, more importantly, that they understand the dangers associated with such chemicals. Those on the opposite side of the House, and I note the contribution by the member for Calare, the spokesperson in this area, unfortunately are making false claims about Australian farmers, claiming that they are all against this legislation. This is patently a false claim. The Cotton Australia's submission is worth noting, and I have a particular coming from St George. My sister was a cotton farmer. Debbie and Philip Boland had a cotton farm there for years. My first job, basically my first big job in the school holidays, was working on that cotton farm for years and years and years, from grade 9, 10, 11 and 12 and beyond. I spent all my time, my summer holidays, out on the cotton farm. I don't know, Deputy Speaker, how many times I was sprayed in that job, and also working with sheep as well, as some other holiday jobs I had. But I return to Cotton Australia's submission, and I quote, "Cotton Australia supports the bill to amend the current Agricultural and Veterinary Chemicals Administration Act 1992, the Agricultural and Veterinary Chemicals Code Act 1994, and the Agricultural and Veterinary Chemical Products Collection of Levy Act 1994. I repeat, Cotton Australia supports the bill. Cotton Australia continues to work with the Department of Forestry and Fisheries and the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority to address the challenges associated with implementing the reforms, and welcomes further opportunities for ongoing consultation and involvement. The Gillard Labor government is determined to ensure that there are effective chemicals which are safe for the health and the environment, and that they're available for Australian farmers while minimising the cost of regulation. The safety of these pesticides is a significant factor when negotiating the terms of the bill. Parkinson's Australia released information about the concern over the relationship between the occupation of farming and the risk of Parkinson's disease due to the exposure of pesticides. It is the repeated low-level chemical exposure over a long period of time in susceptible people, which is difficult to argue on, as Parkinson's is hard to measure in people. Animal models give a clearer picture of the relationship between paraquat and specific neurological damage as occurs in Parkinson's disease. Recent papers have shown that dosages similar to the current no adverse effect level are actually resulting in specific damage. At 4 days after the administration, the concentration of radioactivity was still high in pigmented nerve cells. This is scary information, Deputy Speaker. So how can the member for Calare and his colleagues on the opposite side oppose a bill that aims to resolve the damaging effects of pesticides? It's sad when the National Party is forgetting about the farmers. While chemicals are a necessary requirement for modern intensive farming, and we accept that, and we know that we're going to play an important role in terms of providing food for the rest of Asia, but there is enough evidence in the literature to implicate specific chemicals in the development of Parkinson's disease and probably many other conditions. More research is needed. My home state of Queensland has the largest area of agricultural land of any Australian state and the highest proportion of land area of the Australian states dedicated to agriculture. About 30,500 businesses carry out agricultural activity in Queensland. Agricultural industries are important. They contribute more than $10 billion to the state's economy each year. And as I said in my introductory comments, much of their produce goes through the Brisbane markets in Moreton. The practices and regulation affecting these 30,500 businesses are important to me. And I'm sick and tired of seeing the state Liberal Premier Campbell Newman make cuts to the services that are actually helping these Queensland farmers. Some of the cuts, to mention just a few. He cancelled the plan to build a biosecurity facility worth $17 million in Townsville and instead moved it to that heart of agriculture, Brisbane. So there'll be no access for North Queenslanders to a local biosecurity facility, despite all the risks associated with cane smut and some of the banana diseases and the like. They've cut funding to the Fire Ant Task Force, a Brisbane enterprise, and the Crazy Ant Task Force from Cairns. Premier Newman has cancelled funding for the farm financial counsellors, the very counsellors who assist farmers with business and help them on the road back to profitability after disasters such as floods and cyclones, which we have more than enough of in Queensland. Overall, the bill before the chamber will increase community confidence in the regulation of chemicals used in Australian agricultural practices while reducing the unnecessary impost on business, and it will boost confidence at the checkout. Now, I was playing a bit of word bingo with the member for Calare's presentation, waiting for him to talk about green tape, and it didn't take very long at all, Deputy Speaker. Whilst he recognised that the current arrangements are not efficient, he then went on to talk about green tape. Well, in Queensland we're very familiar with green tape. The day after the state election last year, the Deputy Premier stood up and said that there was too much green tape and effectively we should make the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park smaller. Smaller. That was the first thing, the first announcement from the new Deputy Premier. Obviously, we're yet to see the rollout of the agenda in terms of shooting in national parks as can occur in New South Wales, and the dangerous activities associated with national parks, the complete lackadaisical approach to national parks that the Liberal and National Party has demonstrated. This legislation before the chamber is sensible reform. It will improve the health and safety of farm workers and farmers, people who already have particular dangers associated with their livelihood. So the reforms to the chemicals legislation in this bill will ensure that agricultural productivity can continue to improve and keep Australia at the forefront of innovative food and fibre production. And I commend the bill to the House.